Officer Dale Carter believed in two things: order and superiority. Order, he said, kept chaos at bay. Superiority, well, that one he never said out loud, but it lived in the way he walked, the way he talked, and the way he looked at anyone who didn't look like him. For 20 years, Dale wore his badge like armor, and his prejudice like a hidden tattoo. It was invisible to most who wanted to believe in good cops, but painfully visible to those who'd been stopped, questioned, or humiliated under the pretense of routine checks. He told himself he wasn't racist. He just did his job. He read people. But deep down, Dale knew some people he never gave a chance. It was a hot afternoon in Georgia when everything changed. A protest had formed downtown. Students, workers, mothers, and clergy marching for accountability after another incident between police and a young black man. Dale hated protests. To him, they were noise, chaos, defiance. When dispatch called for backup, he was already irritated. By the time he arrived, sweat glistening on his forehead, a small crowd had gathered in front of the courthouse. Signs rose. Like waves, justice for all, stop police brutality. Equality isn't optional. Dale scowled. These people don't even know what real work looks like, he muttered. That's when he saw her, a young white college girl near the front, holding a sign that read, "Silence is compliance." Her name was Emily Lawson, though he didn't know it yet. When an argument broke out nearby, Dale moved in aggressively. He barked orders, pushed people back, and grabbed Emily's sign. "Step back," he yelled. She didn't. Instead, she raised her voice. "Sir, you don't have to shove people." That's when he did it. He didn't touch her in a sexual way, but what he did was meant to humiliate, to shame. He grabbed the edge of her light summer dress and yanked it upward for a moment as he barked, "Maybe you should think twice before playing hero." Gasps cut through the air like sirens. Emily froze, her face turning crimson. Phones recorded everything. The protest went silent except for one voice, a calm, firm, steady voice that carried authority of its own. Officer Carter. He turned. Standing a few feet away was Angela Morris, a tall black woman in her 40s dressed in a crisp navy blazer. She had been there not as a protester but as a public defender observing the event, documenting arrests. Her eyes didn't flash with rage, they burned with something deeper, disbelief and resolve. "You need to stop," she said. "Right now." Something about her tone made even his fellow officers pause. Dale straightened up, flustered. "Ma'am, step back or I'll—" "You'll what?" Angela asked softly. "Arrest me for witnessing abuse of power?" The crowd stirred. The cell phones kept rolling. And for the first time in a long time, Dale felt something he hadn't felt in uniform. Fear. Not fear of violence, but fear of exposure. That night, the video spread. By morning, it had gone viral. Headlines filled the airwaves. Officer humiliates peaceful protester. Lawyer stands up to police misconduct. The department placed Dale on administrative leave. He slammed the remote down on his kitchen table. "They're making me the bad guy," he growled. "That girl was being disrespectful. That woman, she baited me." But even as he raged, a small voice inside whispered, "You crossed a line." He tried to silence it. A week later, his phone rang. It was the police union's lawyer telling him there'd be a disciplinary hearing, open to public comment. He'd need a character witness, someone who could vouch for his service record. Most of his old friends declined. Some said they were busy, others didn't want to get dragged into the mess. Then he got a letter. It was handwritten, neat cursive on lined paper. "Officer Carter, I'm not writing to shame you. I'm writing to offer you a seat. Every Wednesday I run a restorative justice group at the community center. It's not about punishment. It's about understanding. I think you should come. Angela Morris." He stared at the letter for a long time. He didn't know whether to laugh or tear it up. The same woman who'd called him out in public was now inviting him into her world. But something in her tone, firm, not pitying, stuck with him. That Wednesday, he drove to the South Side Community Center. The neighborhood was mostly black, and he felt out of place the moment he stepped out of his truck. Kids played basketball in the parking lot. Murals of civil rights heroes adorned the brick walls: John Lewis, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr. Inside, a circle of chairs was set up. Angela stood at the front, greeting people warmly. When she saw him, she didn't smile or sneer. She simply nodded. "Glad you came," she said. The group was a mix of people: ex-offenders, victims of police misconduct, youth mentors, and local elders. They talked about pain, forgiveness, fear, and the weight of stereotypes. Dale sat stiffly, arms crossed. When it came his turn to speak, he muttered, "I'm not a racist, I just believe in respect." A middle-aged man across the circle leaned forward. "Respect?" he said quietly. "You ever been pulled over just for being black?" "No," Dale admitted. "Then you don't know respect," the man replied. "You know privilege." The words landed like a stone. Angela didn't interrupt. She just watched as silence settled around Dale. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. Week after week, he returned. At first, it was defensiveness, then discomfort, then slowly, reflection. One evening, Angela shared her own story. "When I was 16, she said, a cop pulled my brother out of his car and threw him on the pavement because he fit the description. I remember my mother standing on the porch, clutching her Bible, praying he wouldn't be the next headline." She paused. "That fear never left us. Even after I became a lawyer, every time I saw blue lights behind me, I felt my throat tighten. Not because of what I did, but because of what I've seen." Dale looked down. He had never thought about what it meant to live afraid of people like him. Months passed. He kept coming, not because anyone forced him, but because something inside was shifting. He started volunteering after sessions, helping clean up chairs, serve meals. He talked with the same young people he once would have dismissed as troublemakers. One night, a teenage boy named Malik asked him, "Why'd you come here if you don't like us?" Dale didn't know what to say. Finally, he answered, "I guess I didn't like what I saw in the mirror." Malik nodded slowly. "Then keep looking." When the disciplinary hearing finally came, the room was packed. Reporters, protesters, department officials. Emily Lawson sat in the audience, her expression calm but firm. Angela was there too, but not to prosecute. She'd been invited by the board as a community representative. Dale stood and read a prepared statement about procedure and misunderstanding. But halfway through, he stopped. His voice cracked. "I can't read this," he said softly. "It's not the truth." He looked out at the room. "I was wrong. I thought power meant control. But now I know. It's responsibility. I humiliated a young woman for no reason except that I felt entitled to. I disrespected my badge and my community." A hush fell over the room. Cameras rolled, but this time Dale didn't care. He turned to Angela. "You showed me what justice really is. It's not about revenge, it's about restoration." Then looking at Emily, he said, "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve what I did." "No one does." Emily's eyes glistened. She nodded slowly, tears threatening to spill. The board suspended him without pay for 6 months and required community service. But as he left, he felt something he hadn't in years: relief. In the months that followed, Dale worked at the same community center, side by side with Angela. Together, they launched a program called Shield and Soul, pairing police officers with local teens to build empathy and dialogue. At first, people were skeptical, but slowly, trust began to grow. Dale wasn't perfect, he still made mistakes, still unlearned habits, but his heart was different. One evening, after a long day of mentoring, Angela found him sitting alone on the steps outside. "Funny thing about justice," she said, sitting beside him. "It's not a courtroom word, it's a human one." He smiled faintly. "You know, I used to think justice meant punishment. Now I think it means healing." Angela nodded. "That's what I've been trying to teach." They sat in silence, for a while listening to the hum of crickets and distant laughter of kids playing ball. Dale took a deep breath. "You could have destroyed me," he said quietly, "and no one would have blamed you." Angela looked at him, her eyes soft. Destruction doesn't change hearts, Dale. Compassion does. Years later, a local news station ran a feature called From Division to Healing. It showed footage of Dale leading workshops with young officers, teaching them about bias, accountability, and respect. It showed Angela at his side, still fierce, still graceful, her presence commanding yet kind. Emily Lawson, now a civil rights advocate, spoke in the segment too. "What he did was wrong," she said. "But what came after showed me that change is possible when people choose humility over hate." The reporter asked Dale, "What's the biggest lesson you've learned?" He paused, looking straight into the camera. "That justice without humanity isn't justice," he said. "And sometimes the people we least expect are the ones who save us from ourselves." When the interview ended, Dale and Angela walked out of the studio together. Outside, a group of kids from their program waved from across the street. Angela smiled. "Looks like we've still got work to do." Dale chuckled. "Work worth doing." They crossed the street side by side, two people from different worlds, bound by one truth. Justice isn't about skin color or authority. It's about courage, empathy, and the choice to heal what's been broken. That night, as the sun dipped below the Georgia pines, Dale sat on his porch, the same uniform folded neatly beside him. He'd kept it, not as a symbol of power, but as a reminder of who he used to be, and how far he'd come. He picked up his phone and typed a message to Angela. "Thank you for teaching me what justice really looks like," she replied a few moments later. "You taught yourself." "Dale, I just handed you the mirror." He smiled, tears stinging his eyes. The sound of cicadas filled the air, the world around him humming with quiet redemption. And in that still Georgia night, one truth rose above all others, that justice isn't found in punishment or pride, but in the humility to listen, the courage to change, and the grace to forgive. 3 years passed. The world had changed, though not enough. There were still protests, still debates, still names turned into hashtags. But in a small corner of Georgia, change had roots, real ones. The Shield and Soul Initiative had grown. What began as one community circle became a statewide movement. Schools, police departments, even churches began hosting dialogues. People who once stood on opposite sides of the street now sat across from one another, learning to speak and to listen. Dale had long since retired from the force. He didn't leave in shame anymore, but in peace. Every morning, he volunteered at the youth center. He'd walk in with 2 cups of coffee, one for himself, one for Angela. And together they'd plan workshops, fundraisers, and mentorship sessions. They'd become an unlikely pair. The cop who once enforced silence and the woman who taught him how to hear. Sometimes, Dale caught himself watching her as she spoke to a room full of young people. How her voice carried warmth and power at once. How her words stitched hope into their hearts. He realized that real leadership wasn't loud, it was steady. It didn't shout people down, it lifted them up. One autumn afternoon, a letter arrived for Dale, stamped with the seal of the State Department of Justice. It invited him to speak at a national symposium on policing reform, alongside Angela. He nearly laughed out loud when he read it. "Me, after everything I did?" Angela smiled when he told her. "That's exactly why you should go," she said. "You don't hide from your past, you use it." And so they went. The hall was filled with hundreds of people, officers, lawyers, community leaders, students. On the stage, Angela spoke first, recounting the story not as a scandal, but as a testament to change. "Justice," she said, "isn't a one-time act. It's a lifelong conversation, and if we're willing to listen, even the hardest hearts can learn its language." When she introduced Dale, there was a brief murmur through the audience. Some still recognized him from the viral video years ago. But when he stepped to the podium, he didn't shrink. He spoke with the humility of a man who had fallen and gotten up again. "I used to think justice meant proving who was right," he said, voice steady but thick with emotion. "Now I know it means doing what's right even when it hurts your pride." He looked out over the audience. "Angela Morris taught me that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the hardest kind of courage there is." The room was silent for a long moment. Then, applause. Long, sustained, heartfelt. After the event, a young officer approached Dale, tears in his eyes. "Sir, I watched that video back when I was a cadet," he said. "I swore I'd never become that kind of cop. But I also swore I'd never stop believing people could change." "You proved that's possible." Dale shook his hand. "Then keep that promise, son. Every day you put on that badge, keep it." That night, back in Georgia, Dale stopped by the community garden behind the center. He'd planted it with the teens years ago. Small rows of vegetables and flowers that the kids tended after class. He knelt by a patch of sunflowers, running his fingers through the soil. Angela joined him a few minutes later. "Speech of the year," she teased. He chuckled. "Yours too." They sat there quietly, the twilight settling over them. Fireflies flickered in the dusk like small patient stars. "Funny," Dale said. "I used to think justice came from a courtroom. Turns out it grows from the ground up." Angela smiled. "Exactly. You don't plant justice in laws. You plant it in people." They sat in silence, the kind of silence that speaks more than words. And for a moment the world seemed right. Not perfect, not healed, but healing. Years later, after Angela passed away peacefully in her sleep, thousands came to her memorial. Lawyers, activists, mothers, and children filled the church pews. Dale sat in the front row, his white hair glinting in the morning light, hands trembling slightly as he held the folded program. When they asked him to speak, he rose slowly, his voice soft but steady. "Angela taught me what real justice looks like," he said. "It looks like patience when you want revenge. It looks like compassion when you're told to hate. It looks like truth spoken gently but firmly, even to those who don't want to hear it." He paused, glancing at the portrait of her smiling from the altar. "She believed that people could change, and because of her, I did." That's the legacy she leaves behind. Not a courtroom victory, but 1,000 hearts made softer. Tears filled his eyes, but his voice didn't break. "She showed me that justice isn't about who wins. It's about who becomes better." After the service, as people left flowers by the steps, a young girl approached Dale. She couldn't have been older than 12. Her hair in neat braids, a shy smile on her face. "Mr. Carter?" she said. "I go to the center. Miss Angela used to say you were her best student." He laughed softly. "She said that, huh?" The girl nodded. "She told me justice was a garden. You water it every day, even when you're tired." He felt his throat tighten. "She was right," he whispered. The girl handed him a small envelope. "She told me to give you this someday." Inside was a note written in Angela's elegant hand. "If you're reading this, I've probably gone home to rest. But don't you stop the work, Dale. Justice is a relay, not a finish line. Pass the baton. Keep planting." He folded the note carefully and tucked it into his jacket pocket. Every year after that, on the anniversary of the first protest, the day everything changed, Dale returned to that courthouse. He'd place a bouquet of white lilies at the steps and stand quietly, watching people come and go. He never gave speeches or sought recognition. He simply stood, remembering. Because that's what justice looks like too. Remembrance, humility, and the quiet promise to do better. And in the stillness of those moments, as the sun rose high over Georgia, the echoes of Angela's words lived on. Destruction doesn't change hearts. Compassion does. He whispered them aloud every time, letting the words roll through him like a prayer. Then he'd smile softly and say, "You were right, Angela. Justice didn't end with you. It began." And somewhere, in the laughter of children at the center, in the steady hands of a young officer learning to listen before speaking, in the trembling voice of someone choosing forgiveness over fury, her lesson kept living. Because true justice isn't carved in stone or written in law books. It breathes in the spaces between people. It heals what hatred once broke. And it teaches us over and over that even the hardest hearts can bloom again, if only someone dares to show them the light. 10 years after Angela's passing, the Southside Community Center had become more than a building. It was a heartbeat. The garden she'd started was now a thriving orchard of learning and laughter. Raised beds of tomatoes and collard greens, benches where young people shared dreams, murals that told the stories of healing, forgiveness, and courage. Dale Carter was 71 now. His steps were slower, his hair completely white, but his spirit carried the same steady fire that Angela had once kindled in him. Every morning, he arrived before sunrise, unlocking the same front doors he had once entered as a broken man, trying to understand what went wrong. Now he came to water the garden, make coffee for volunteers, and sit with anyone who needed to talk. The teens called him Mr. Dale or Grandpa C. They didn't know much about his past, just that he listened like no one else. Sometimes, after workshops, he'd tell bits of his story. Not the viral video, not the shame, but the redemption. I met someone who believed in justice, he'd say. Not the kind that punishes, but the kind that heals. She saw something in me I didn't even see in myself. And that saved my life. He always paused then, eyes drifting to the mural painted on the back wall. A portrait of Angela, her arms open, surrounded by words she had once spoken. Justice grows where compassion takes root. One spring afternoon, as the magnolias began to bloom, a young recruit from the local police academy came to the center. Her name was Officer Naomi Reed, fresh out of training, nervous but determined. "I've heard about this place," she said, shaking Dale's hand. "They told us every new officer should spend a week here, to learn what the academy doesn't teach." Dale smiled. "Then you're in the right place." They sat on a bench near the garden. Naomi looked around, eyes full of curiosity. "Sir," she asked hesitantly, "why do you do this?" "You could be retired, living easy," he chuckled softly. "Because easy doesn't change the world," Naomi laughed. "Fair point." Then she grew quiet. "Did you ever get it wrong? In uniform, I mean?" Dale looked out at the garden, where kids were laughing and chasing butterflies. "I got almost everything wrong," he said honestly. "But someone showed me how to make it right. That's what justice is. Not being perfect, but being willing to change." That evening, Naomi stayed late, helping him lock up. Before she left, she asked, "Mr. Carter, do you think people can really change? Like truly?" He smiled, the lines around his eyes deep and kind. "Change isn't magic," he said. "It's a choice you make every day, sometimes every hour. The trick is to keep choosing." She nodded slowly, as if trying to remember each word. "Thank you, sir." As she left, Dale looked after her and felt something warm stir in his chest, the same feeling Angela had once given him. Hope. Months later, Naomi returned to the center, this time in uniform, with 3 other young officers in tow. They were there to help with the youth summer program. She found Dale near the garden pruning sunflowers. "Thought you could use an extra hand," she said, smiling. He grinned. Angela would have loved this. "Who was she?" one of the officers asked. Dale pointed toward the mural. "She's the reason this place exists. She's the reason I exist the way I am now." He told them about Angela, the lawyer who stood up when no one else would, who taught him that justice without compassion was hollow, who believed that hearts could change if given a chance. The young officers listened in silence. When he finished, Naomi said softly, "Sounds like she was a hero." Dale nodded. She was, but she didn't think so. She just believed the world could do better, one person at a time. That night, as the center emptied and the crickets began to sing, Dale walked through the garden one last time before heading home. The air was cool, the sky deep purple. Fireflies blinked above the flowers like tiny lanterns of memory. He stopped by Angela's favorite spot, a stone bench under the magnolia tree. Someone had placed fresh lilies there. He sat down slowly, his knees aching, and whispered into the twilight. "Still planting, Angela. Still passing the baton." A breeze swept through the garden, gentle but sure, carrying the faint scent of magnolia blossoms. He closed his eyes, letting it wash over him. For a moment he could almost hear her voice. Calm, strong, timeless. Justice isn't a finish line, Dale. It's a garden. And as long as someone's willing to tend it, it'll never stop growing. He smiled, tears tracing down his wrinkled cheeks. "Then it'll grow forever," he whispered. When the morning came, the staff found him still sitting there, peaceful, his hand resting on Angela's old letter. On the bench beside him lay a note he had written the night before. "If you're reading this, don't mourn me. Just keep planting. Justice needs gardeners more than heroes." They buried him near the magnolia tree, beside a small plaque that read Dale Carter, once a man of power, forever a man of peace. He learned what justice looks like, and never stopped teaching it. Years later, The community center was renamed the Angela Morris and Dale Carter Foundation for Justice and Renewal. Children still laughed in the gardens. Police recruits still came to learn, and every spring, the magnolia tree bloomed brighter, as if remembering the two souls who had changed a town, a system, and countless hearts, simply by daring to believe that love could rebuild what hate had broken. And somewhere, in every act of kindness, in every apology made in courage, in every hand extended across fear, their story lived on. Because true justice doesn't end with one lifetime. It echoes through every generation brave enough to listen, to heal, and to choose compassion again and again. The end.